The distress beacon pierced through the void of space like a desperate scream. It carried the encrypted signature of the Galactic Federation. But something was wrong. The signal was weak, fragmented, and filled with static that made Admiral Sarah Chen frown as she studied the transmission logs aboard the UES Prometheus. "Ma'am, we're picking up multiple Federation frequencies," reported Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb from the communications station. His voice carried the tension that had been building in the bridge crew for the past hour. "All of them are broadcasting the same message." Sarah leaned forward in her command chair, her weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the holographic displays. At 52, she had seen enough combat to recognize desperation when she heard it. The fact that the Galactic Federation was broadcasting on multiple emergency channels simultaneously meant only one thing. They were facing extinction. "Play it again, Marcus. Clean it up as much as you can." The bridge fell silent as the speakers crackled to life. Through the static, an alien voice spoke in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "This is High Chancellor Vex High of the Galactic Federation. We are under siege by the Void Hunters. Our defenses have failed. We require immediate military assistance from any spacefaring civilization capable of combat operations. We are willing to offer our entire star system as payment. Please, anyone who receives this message, to help us." The transmission cut off, leaving only the steady hum of the ship's engines. Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. The Galactic Federation had ruled over 200 star systems for nearly 1,000 years. They commanded fleets that numbered in the tens of thousands. For them to be begging for help meant they were facing something beyond their understanding. "Lieutenant Webb, how long ago was this transmission sent?" Marcus's fingers danced across his console, running calculations through the ship's quantum computers. "Based on the signal degradation and our current position, approximately 72 hours ago, Admiral." 72 hours, Sarah repeated softly. In space combat, 72 hours might as well be an eternity. Whatever was happening to the Federation worlds was likely already over, but the fact that they were still receiving the distress signal meant some part of their communication network was still operational. She turned to her tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Colonel James Harrison. "Jim, what do we know about these Void Hunters?" Harrison's expression was grim as he pulled up classified files on his terminal. "Not much, Admiral. They're mentioned in some of our deep space reconnaissance reports, but always as rumors. Ships that vanish without a trace. Entire colonies that go dark overnight. The few survivors who've encountered them describe massive black vessels that seem to absorb light itself. Energy weapons? Unknown. The reports are too fragmentary to be reliable. What we do know is that they don't seem interested in communication or negotiation. Every encounter ends the same way. Total destruction of human assets." Sarah stood and walked to the massive viewport that dominated the front of the bridge. Beyond the reinforced transparent aluminum, stars twinkled like distant diamonds against the absolute black of space. Somewhere out there, an ancient civilization was dying, and they had sent out a call for help that no one else had answered. "Admiral," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Commander Elena Vasquez, her chief science officer, approaching with a datapad in hand. "I've been analyzing the Federation's distress signal. There's something you need to see." Elena activated her tablet, projecting a three-dimensional star map into the air between them. The Federation's territory was highlighted in blue, with their capital system pulsing at the center. But surrounding it was something that made Sarah's blood run cold. A spreading darkness that seemed to devour star systems, one by one. "This is the Federation's last known territorial map," Elena explained, "and this," she manipulated the projection to show red markers appearing across the map, "is what I've extrapolated based on the distress signals we've intercepted over the past 6 months." The red markers formed a clear pattern. System after system had gone dark, creating an expanding sphere of emptiness that was converging on the Federation's core worlds. It wasn't random piracy or civil war. This was a systematic extermination campaign. "How many systems?" Sarah asked quietly. 47 confirmed dark. Another 23 haven't reported in over 2 weeks. Elena's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the fear in her eyes. Admiral, if this pattern continues, the Void Hunters will reach the outer edge of human space in less than 6 months. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Federation had always served as a buffer between human space and the unknown dangers that lurked in the galactic rim. Without them, humanity would be exposed and alone. Ma'am. Lieutenant Webb's voice cut through the silence. I'm receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. They want to speak with you immediately. Sarah nodded and made her way to her private communications chamber adjacent to the bridge. The small room was lined with quantum encryption arrays that ensured complete privacy for high-level conversations. She activated the system and waited as the connection established itself across the light years between her ship and Earth. The hologram that materialized was that of Fleet Admiral Chen Lu, Sarah's older brother and the commanding officer of the entire Human Defense Force. His face was drawn with exhaustion, and she could see the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. Sarah, he said without preamble, please tell me you have good news. I'm afraid not, Lu. The situation is worse than we thought. The Federation isn't just under attack. They're being systematically exterminated. If our projections are correct, they won't last another week. Her brother closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. We've been monitoring the situation from here. The Security Council is in emergency session. But they're divided. Half want to offer humanitarian aid, the other half think we should use this as an opportunity to expand our territory. And you? I think we're about to inherit a war whether we want it or not. These Void Hunters won't stop with the Federation. If they're as dangerous as the reports suggest, we need to act now, while we still have allies. Sarah felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. It was the same feeling she'd had before the Battle of Kepler Station, when she'd been forced to make a decision that saved thousands of lives but cost her half her fleet. Command was about making impossible choices with insufficient information. What are my orders, Admiral? Officially, you're to proceed to the Federation capital and conduct a reconnaissance mission to assess the threat level. Lu paused. And when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Unofficially, you have the Prometheus and her battle group. If you think you can make a difference. Understood. The connection terminated, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She stared at her reflection in the darkened hologram projector, seeing the same weathered features that had carried her through 23 years of military service. But now those features carried something new. The knowledge that the decisions she made in the next few days could determine the fate of 2 entire civilizations. She returned to the bridge to find her senior staff waiting for her. They had served together for 3 years, through pirate raids and border skirmishes, and the tense standoff with the Centauri Alliance. They trusted her, and more importantly, she trusted them. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, retaking her command chair. We have new orders. We're proceeding to the Federation capital system to assess the Void Hunter threat. She paused, looking each of them in the eye. I won't lie to you. This mission is extremely dangerous. We're potentially flying into the middle of a war zone, with an enemy we know nothing about. Colonel Harrison was the first to speak. Ma'am, what's our operational status? We have authorization to engage if necessary to protect Federation civilians or gather intelligence on Void Hunter capabilities. Sarah's voice hardened. But understand this. If we go in, we're going in alone. The nearest human fleet is 4 days away at maximum burn. Admiral, Commander Vasquez interjected, if these Void Hunters are as dangerous as the reports suggest, shouldn't we wait for reinforcements? Sarah considered the question carefully. Elena was right to be cautious. The Prometheus was a powerful ship, but she was only one vessel against an enemy that had apparently destroyed entire Federation fleets. But waiting meant condemning millions of innocent beings to death, while politicians on Earth debated. Negative. Every hour we delay, more people die. Besides, she allowed herself a small smile. The Federation made one critical error when they sent out their distress call. Ma'am? Lieutenant Webb looked confused. They asked for help from any spacefaring civilization capable of combat operations. They didn't specify which spacefaring civilization. Sarah's smile grew wider. They've never fought humans before. They have no idea what they've just unleashed. The bridge crew exchanged glances, and Sarah could see the beginning of grins on several faces. It was true that humans were relative newcomers to galactic civilization, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 60 years ago. But those 60 years had been marked by a series of conflicts that had forged the Human Defense Force into one of the most effective military organizations in the galaxy. Lieutenant Webb, send a message to the Federation capital. Tell them that the Human Defense Force has received their distress call and that help is on the way. Aye, Admiral. Colonel Harrison, I want all weapon systems checked and rechecked. Load torpedo tubes with our heaviest warheads, and make sure our point defense systems are operating at peak efficiency. Already in progress, ma'am. Commander Vasquez, I need everything you can give me on Void Hunter technology. Analyze every scrap of data we have, and try to determine their weaknesses. Understood. Admiral. Sarah turned back to the viewport as her crew carried out their orders with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The stars ahead remained unchanged, but she knew that somewhere among them, ancient evils were stirring. The Galactic Federation had ruled for 1,000 years through diplomacy, trade agreements, and carefully managed conflicts. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival, but humans remembered. They had been fighting for survival since their species first walked upright on a dangerous world that tried to kill them every single day. Earth had forged them in fire and ice, in plague and famine, in wars that spanned continents and decades. They had learned to adapt, to overcome, to never give up, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. Navigation. Plot a course for the Federation capital. Maximum burn. Course plotted and laid in, Admiral. Engage. The Prometheus shuddered slightly as her massive fusion drives came online, accelerating the ship toward a destiny none of them could imagine. Behind her, the rest of Battle Group 7 fell into formation. The heavy cruisers Manchester and Beijing, the destroyers Swift and Relentless, and the support vessel Columbia. It wasn't much of a fleet by Federation standards, but it represented the cutting edge of human military technology. As they entered hyperspace, Sarah found herself thinking about her daughter back on Earth. Lisa was 16 now, preparing for her entrance exams to the Naval Academy. Sarah had always hoped that by the time Lisa graduated, the galaxy would be a more peaceful place. Instead, it seemed like the universe was about to become far more dangerous. Admiral, Commander Vasquez, appeared at her side. I've finished my preliminary analysis of the Void Hunter data. What did you find? It's disturbing, ma'am. Based on the few reliable reports we have, their ships appear to be biological in nature. They don't use conventional energy weapons or missiles. Instead, they seem to project some kind of dark energy that can disrupt both organic and electronic systems. Sarah frowned. Biological ships? That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would. I know it sounds crazy, but the evidence is consistent. Multiple witnesses describe ships that look more like enormous insects or deep-sea creatures than traditional spacecraft. And there's something else. Elena hesitated. The few survivors who've encountered them describe hearing voices in their heads, whispers in languages they don't understand. Telepathy? Possibly. Or some form of psychological warfare we've never encountered before. Sarah absorbed this information silently. Biological ships and telepathic abilities were beyond anything in human experience. But every enemy had weaknesses, and humans had a long history of finding and exploiting those weaknesses. Keep working on it, Elena. I want options, no matter how theoretical. As the hours passed, Battle Group 7 raced through hyperspace toward the Federation capital. The journey would take 18 hours at their current speed, which gave them time to prepare for whatever they might find. But as Sarah studied the latest intelligence reports, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying into something unprecedented. The Federation had been humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. When human explorers had emerged from their home system, they had been greeted by Federation diplomats who welcomed them into a community of peaceful, enlightened species. The Federation members were scholars, artists, and philosophers who had long ago abandoned warfare in favor of intellectual pursuits. It had taken humans several years to realize that this wasn't necessarily a good thing. The Federation species had grown soft during their long peace, their military technology stagnating, while their enemies grew stronger. When pirates or raiders threatened Federation worlds, they relied on hired mercenaries or negotiated ransoms rather than fighting back. But now they faced something that couldn't be reasoned with or bought off. The Void Hunters weren't interested in conquest or plunder. They seemed driven by something far more sinister: the complete extinction of all life they encountered. "Admiral." Lieutenant Webb's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're receiving another transmission. It's from the Federation capital." Quote. Sarah straightened in her chair. "Put it through." The speakers crackled with static, but the voice that emerged was clear enough to understand. It was different from the previous transmission, younger and more desperate. "This is Emergency Coordinator Thane speaking from New Geneva, capital of the Galactic Federation. Our outer defenses have fallen. Void Hunter ships are entering the inner system. We have perhaps 6 hours before they reach our population centers. If anyone receives this transmission, please, we have 12 billion souls on this world alone. Don't let us die in darkness." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. 12 billion people facing extinction in 6 hours. Sarah felt the familiar cold weight of command settling over her like a shroud. Every decision she made from this point forward would be measured in millions of lives. "Navigator, how long until we reach the Federation capital?" 14 hours at current speed, Admiral. Too long. By the time they arrived, it would all be over. Unless, can we increase speed? We're already at maximum burn, ma'am. The engines can't take any more stress. Sarah closed her eyes and ran the calculations in her head. 14 hours to reach a battle that would be over in 6. It was impossible. But humans had built their entire civilization on doing the impossible. "Colonel Harrison, what's the status of our experimental drive system?" Harrison's face went pale. "Admiral, the quantum tunnel drive is still in testing phase. We've only run 3 successful trials. And the stress on the ship's hull, how fast? If it works, we could cut the transit time to 4 hours. But if it fails, we'd be scattered across half the galaxy as subatomic particles," Sarah finished. "I understand the risks, Colonel. But 12 billion people are going to die if we don't try something." She looked around the bridge at her crew. These were people who had followed her into impossible situations before and somehow come out the other side. They trusted her judgment, even when that judgment led them into mortal danger. "I'm not ordering anyone to do this," she said quietly. "This is a volunteer mission. Anyone who wants to transfer to one of the other ships in our battle group can do so now." 2. No one moved. Sarah felt a surge of pride that nearly brought tears to her eyes. These weren't just soldiers, they were family. And family didn't abandon each other when things got difficult. "Very well. Colonel Harrison, initialize the quantum tunnel drive. All hands, prepare for emergency transit." As the experimental drive systems came online, Sarah found herself thinking about the message they had sent to the Federation capital. Help was on the way. They had promised. She only hoped they would arrive in time to keep that promise. The Prometheus shuddered as exotic energies built up in her experimental drive core. Through the viewport, the stars began to shift and blur as space-time itself bent around the ship. In 4 hours, they would either arrive at the Federation capital in time to make a difference, or they would cease to exist entirely. Sarah gripped the arms of her command chair and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. The Galactic Federation had called for help from the wrong race, not knowing that humans were the one species in the galaxy that had never learned how to surrender. The quantum tunnel collapsed with a violence that shook every bolt in the Prometheus's hull. Alarms screamed across the bridge as the ship tumbled out of hyperspace like a stone thrown from a cliff. Admiral Sarah Chen felt her stomach lurch as artificial gravity struggled to compensate for their chaotic emergence. "Damage report," she barked, gripping her command chair as the ship shuddered around her. "Hull stress is at 93% of maximum tolerance," Colonel Harrison reported, his voice tight with concern. "We've got microfractures throughout the superstructure, but nothing critical. The experimental drive is completely offline. Navigation, where are we?" Lieutenant Webb's fingers flew across his console as he tried to make sense of their readings. We're, Admiral, I think we overshot. We're in the outer system, approximately 4 hours from New Geneva, at conventional speeds. Sarah felt her heart sink. They had risked everything on an experimental technology that might have saved them 2 hours at best, but as she stared at the tactical display, her despair transformed into something else entirely, something that made her smile for the first time in days. Colonel Harrison, are you seeing this? The tactical officer had gone completely still, staring at his displays with the expression of a man who couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Admiral, there are hundreds of them. Void Hunter ships, I mean. They're everywhere. The main display shifted to show a comprehensive tactical overview of the New Geneva system. What Sarah saw there defied comprehension. The Void Hunter fleet wasn't just large. It was enormous. Thousands of organic-looking vessels drifted through space like a swarm of predatory fish, their dark hulls seeming to absorb the light from the system's star. But it was the ships themselves that made Sarah's blood run cold. Commander Vasquez had been right. They looked nothing like conventional spacecraft. Instead, they resembled massive creatures from the deepest trenches of some alien ocean. Their hulls rippled and pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and long tendrils extended from their main bodies like the arms of some cosmic jellyfish. "My God," whispered Commander Vasquez from her station. "They're beautiful, beautifully terrifying," Sarah corrected. "What's the status of the Federation fleet?" Lieutenant Webb worked his controls, scanning for friendly signatures. What he found made his face go white. "Admiral, I'm detecting the wreckage of at least 40 Federation vessels. Heavy cruisers, battleships, even their command carriers. They're all dead in space." Sarah studied the debris field that had once been the Federation's home fleet. These hadn't just been destroyed, they had been systematically dismantled. The Void Hunters had taken apart each ship piece by piece, leaving behind only twisted metal and the frozen corpses of their crews. How long ago? Based on the debris patterns and thermal signatures. Maybe 3 hours. 3 hours. The Federation's last stand had ended just an hour before the Prometheus arrived. Sarah felt the familiar weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. But this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't just fighting for human interests or territorial disputes. She was fighting for the very concept of civilization itself. "Commander Vasquez, I need everything you can tell me about these ships. How do they move? How do they attack? What keeps them alive?" Elena had been studying the Void Hunter fleet through the ship's most powerful sensors, and what she had discovered was disturbing beyond words. "Admiral, these aren't ships in any conventional sense. They're living organisms, possibly engineered or evolved for space warfare. I'm detecting massive neural networks running through their hulls. Circulation systems that appear to pump some kind of exotic fluid. And what might be digestive chambers. Digestive chambers? They're consuming the Federation ships, Admiral, breaking them down at the molecular level and incorporating the materials into their own structures. That's how they repair damage, and possibly how they reproduce." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. These weren't just conquerors. They were a plague that consumed everything in their path. No wonder the Federation had been so completely overwhelmed. How do you fight an enemy that grows stronger with every victory? "Ma'am," Lieutenant Webb's voice was urgent. "I'm detecting movement in the main Void Hunter fleet. They're forming up into attack formations and moving toward New Geneva." The tactical display shifted to show the planet itself, a blue-green marble that looked remarkably like Earth. Around it, the orbital defense platforms that had protected the Federation capital for centuries were going dark one by one, consumed by the advancing swarm. "How many people on that planet?" Sarah asked quietly. 12 billion, according to the distress call. 12 billion souls about to be fed to cosmic horrors. Sarah made her decision with the cold certainty that had carried her through 2 decades of command. It didn't matter that they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. It didn't matter that their experimental drive had failed and left them stranded in enemy territory. What mattered was that somewhere on that planet, people were looking up at the sky and hoping that someone, somewhere, cared enough to help them. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We are going to engage the Void Hunter fleet." The communications channel erupted with responses from the other ships in Battle Group 7. Captain Rodriguez of the Manchester was the first to respond. "Admiral, with respect, we're looking at several thousand enemy vessels. Our entire battle group wouldn't last 5 minutes in a direct engagement." "You're absolutely right, Captain. Which is why we're not going to fight fair." Sarah's voice took on the tone that her crew had learned to recognize over the years. It was the voice she used when she was about to do something that would either be remembered as brilliant or suicidal. "We're going to hit them where they don't expect it and use every dirty trick in the book." "What did you have in mind, Admiral?" asked Captain Liu from the Beijing. Sarah studied the tactical display, looking for patterns in the Void Hunter formation. They moved like a school of fish, flowing around obstacles and reforming seamlessly when threatened. But fish had predictable behaviors, and Sarah had spent her childhood fishing in the lakes near her family's farm. "They're following biological imperatives," she said, thinking out loud. "They move as a group, they consume everything in their path, and they reproduce by incorporating destroyed enemy vessels. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness." "How so?" asked Commander Vasquez. "Look at their formation. They're arranged around the largest specimens, probably their queen ships or hive minds. If we can disrupt their command structure, the entire swarm might become disorganized." Colonel Harrison finished. "But Admiral, those queen ships are in the center of the formation. We'd never get close enough to engage them." Sarah smiled, and several of her bridge crew took an unconscious step backward. They knew that smile. It was the same expression she'd worn before the Battle of Kepler Station, when she'd rammed her previous command ship into an enemy dreadnought to save a colony transport. "Who says we need to get close?" "Colonel Harrison, what's our current inventory of nuclear torpedoes?" 48 heavy warheads, Admiral. But their hulls appear to be heavily armored. A conventional nuclear strike might not. "I'm not talking about conventional strikes." Sarah turned to Commander Vasquez. "Elena, you said these organisms have circulatory systems. What happens if we introduce a foreign substance into their bloodstream?" Understanding dawned on the science officer's face. "If we could get a small enough warhead into their internal systems, the explosion would disrupt their entire biological network. But Admiral, we'd need to deliver the torpedo inside their hull, which means someone has to get close enough to punch through their outer membrane." Sarah nodded grimly. "I'll take the Prometheus in alone. The rest of the battle group will provide covering fire and extract any survivors from the Federation orbital stations." "Admiral," Colonel Harrison's voice was carefully controlled, "that's a suicide mission. Even if you succeed in damaging one of their queen ships, you'll be surrounded by thousands of hostile vessels. Maybe we'll discover that humans are just as good at adapting as these void hunters." Sarah turned to face her crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to attempt something that has never been done before. We're going to fight a space battle using tactics borrowed from cellular biology." She activated the ship-wide communication system, her voice reaching every corner of the Prometheus. "All hands. This is the Admiral. In approximately 30 minutes, we're going to engage an enemy fleet that outnumbers us by several thousand to one. Our mission is to protect 12 billion innocent lives and buy time for Federation evacuation efforts." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I won't lie to you. This is probably a one-way trip. But I want you to remember something. We're not just representing the human defense force today. We're representing every species that believes in freedom, in justice, and in the right to exist without fear. The Void Hunters have consumed dozens of civilizations, but they've never faced humans before. They don't know that we come from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. They don't know that we learned to fight back against impossible odds before we even discovered fire." The crew had gone completely silent, hanging on every word. "Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten something humans care about. Today, we remind the universe that Deathworld species don't know how to quit. All hands. Prepare for combat operations." As the crew scrambled to carry out their orders, Sarah found herself staring at the tactical display once more. The Void Hunter fleet was still advancing on New Geneva. Their organic ships pulsing with alien energies. In 20 minutes, they would reach the planet's outer defense perimeter. In an hour, they would begin the systematic extermination of 12 billion souls. Unless a single human ship could do the impossible. Admiral. Commander Vasquez approached with a data tablet in her hands. I've been analyzing the Void Hunter ships more closely. I think I've found something. Sarah accepted the tablet and studied the sensor readings. Elena had isolated one of the smaller Void Hunter vessels and subjected it to every type of scan in their arsenal. What she had discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. They're not just biological, Sarah said slowly. They're quantum-entangled organisms. That's how they coordinate their movements across such vast distances. Exactly. But more importantly, I think I've identified their vulnerability. See these neural clusters? Elena pointed to several bright spots on the scan. They're the quantum communication nodes. If we could disrupt even one of them, the entire network would experience feedback. Sarah's smile returned. But this time, it wasn't predatory. It was the expression of someone who had just found the key to an impossible lock. How many torpedoes would we need? For a localized disruption? Maybe 3 or 4 targeted strikes. But Admiral, the torpedoes would need to be delivered with surgical precision. We're talking about hitting targets the size of a basketball from a range of several hundred kilometers, while under fire from thousands of enemy vessels. Sarah handed the tablet back to her science officer. Elena, you've just given me the best news I've heard all day. How is that good news? Because impossible shots are what humans specialize in. Sarah activated her command console and began uploading new targeting parameters to the ship's weapons systems. Lieutenant Webb, signal the rest of our battle group. They are to proceed to New Geneva and begin evacuation operations. We'll buy them as much time as we can. Admiral. Colonel Harrison's voice was unusually quiet. Requesting permission to transfer to one of the other ships, Sarah looked up in surprise. In 3 years of serving together, Jim Harrison had never once requested a transfer. Even during their most dangerous missions. Permission denied, Colonel. I need you here. Ma'am, you don't understand. I'm not asking to transfer because I'm afraid. Harrison's scarred face was completely serious. I'm asking because my wife just had a baby, and I'd like to see her again someday. Jim, if we don't stop these things here, your daughter won't have a galaxy to grow up in. Harrison held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Aye, Admiral. Weapons systems are ready. The next few minutes passed in tense preparation as the Prometheus broke away from the battle group and accelerated toward the Void Hunter swarm. Sarah watched the tactical display as their sister ships changed course for New Geneva, hoping desperately that she was buying them enough time to save at least some of the planet's population. Admiral, Lieutenant Webb reported. We're being scanned by multiple Void Hunter vessels. I think they've noticed us. Good. I was worried we might have to send them an engraved invitation. Sarah settled back in her command chair and activated the ship's combat protocols. All stations, report readiness. One by one, her department heads confirmed that the Prometheus was ready for battle. Engineering had rerouted power to weapons and shields. Medical had prepared for casualties. Damage control teams were standing by throughout the ship. It was the same routine they had followed dozens of times before. But Sarah knew this time was different. This time, they were fighting for the very survival of civilization itself. Enemy ships are changing course to intercept, reported Colonel Harrison. I count 47 vessels moving to engage us directly. Only 47? I'm insulted. Sarah studied the approaching enemy formation and began calculating attack vectors. Are they maintaining their quantum entanglement? Commander Vasquez consulted her sensors. Yes, Admiral. All ships are still showing synchronized neural activity. Perfect. That means when we hit them all. Sarah leaned forward in her command chair. Helm, take us into the heart of their formation. Best speed, the Prometheus surged forward under maximum acceleration, her fusion drives leaving a trail of superheated plasma in her wake. Around them, space began to fill with Void Hunter ships, as the swarm converged on this lone challenger. Sarah had seen a lot of alien ship designs in her career, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of Void Hunter vessels up close. They moved with a fluid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in complex rhythms that reminded her of a heartbeat. Massive tendrils extended from their hulls like the arms of some cosmic anemone, reaching out to embrace and consume anything that came within range. "First wave incoming," Colonel Harrison announced. "Range, 10,000 kilometers and closing." "Wait for it," Sarah said calmly. The Void Hunter ships opened fire with weapons unlike anything in human experience. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they projected waves of absolute darkness that seemed to bend space itself. Where the dark energy touched the Prometheus's shields, reality flickered and twisted in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Shields are fluctuating," Harrison reported. "Whatever that weapon is, it's interfering with our defensive systems on a quantum level. Then we'll just have to not get hit." Helm, evasive maneuvers. Pattern Delta 7. The Prometheus dove and rolled through space like a fighter craft, her massive bulk moving with surprising agility. Sarah had trained her helmsman, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, to think of the ship not as a half-kilometer-long warship, but as an extension of her own body. The young woman responded to Sarah's orders with an intuitive understanding that came from years of practice. "Range, 5,000 kilometers," Harrison announced. "Fire torpedo spread. Target the neural clusters Commander Vasquez identified." 4 nuclear torpedoes streaked away from the Prometheus, their courses programmed with targeting data that would have been impossible to calculate without quantum computers. Sarah watched their progress on the tactical display, knowing that the next few seconds would determine the fate of 12 billion lives. The first torpedo struck a Void Hunter ship amidships, punching through its organic hull and detonating inside what appeared to be a major nerve cluster. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star, and Sarah felt a moment of triumph as she watched the enemy ship begin to convulse. Then the feedback effect began. It started as a ripple of distorted bioluminescence that spread from the wounded ship to its nearest neighbors. Within seconds, the ripple had become a wave that raced through the entire Void Hunter fleet at the speed of thought. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly began to drift aimlessly, their organic hulls flickering with chaotic patterns of light. "My God," whispered Commander Vasquez. "It worked. The quantum entanglement network is collapsing." But Sarah's moment of triumph was short-lived. Even as hundreds of Void Hunter ships lost coordination, others were adapting to the disruption. She watched in fascination and growing horror as the fleet began to reorganize itself around new neural clusters, forming smaller but still effective swarms. "They're learning," she said quietly. "They're actually adapting to our tactics in real time." "Admiral," Colonel Harrison's voice was urgent, "we've got bigger problems. Look at the ships we damaged." Sarah turned her attention back to the vessels that had been caught in the torpedo explosions. Instead of dying, they were changing. Their organic hulls were reshaping themselves, growing new structures that looked suspiciously like human technology. As she watched, energy weapons that looked exactly like Federation plasma cannons emerged from their transformed bodies. "They're not just adapting to our tactics," she realized with growing dread. "They're adapting our technology. They're learning how to be us." The reformed Void Hunter ships opened fire with their new weapons, and suddenly the news of Admiral Chen's sacrifice reached Earth Command exactly 47 hours after the last transmission from the Prometheus. Fleet Admiral Chen Lu stood in the central command center of the Human Defense Force, staring at the tactical display that showed the aftermath of the Battle of New Geneva. His sister's ship was gone, reduced to scattered atoms in the heart of an alien horror. But her final act had saved billions of lives. "Status report," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of both command authority and personal grief. General Patricia Hayes, the HDF's chief of operations, stepped forward with a data tablet in her hands. "The immediate crisis has passed, Admiral. Federation reinforcements arrived 6 hours after the Prometheus was destroyed and finished off the remaining Void Hunter forces. Preliminary reports indicate that 8.7 billion Federation citizens were successfully evacuated from New Geneva. And the Void Hunter threat? That's where things get complicated, sir." Hayes activated the room's main holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of known space. Intelligence suggests that what we encountered at New Geneva was just one tendril of a much larger organism. Long-range sensors are detecting similar fleet movements in at least 40 other systems. Lou studied the map with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 30 years planning interstellar warfare. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Void Hunter incursions weren't random attacks. They were probing operations, testing the defenses of various civilizations, and learning from each encounter. They're preparing for something bigger, he realized. That's our assessment as well, sir. The Federation Council has requested an emergency session with Earth's leadership. They want to discuss a formal military alliance. Lou raised an eyebrow. For 800 years, the Galactic Federation had carefully maintained its distance from humanity, treating them as useful, but ultimately primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. Human requests for technology transfers had been politely declined. Human offers of military assistance had been diplomatically ignored. The Federation had been content to let humans patrol the dangerous frontier regions while they focused on their art, philosophy, and trade. But now, faced with an existential threat, they were suddenly very interested in human military capabilities. What are the terms they're proposing? Full membership in the Federation, immediate technology sharing, and joint command authority over all military operations against Void Hunter forces. Hayes paused. They're also offering Admiral Chen posthumous recognition as a hero of the Federation, the highest honor they can bestow on a non-member. Lou felt a bitter smile tug at the corners of his mouth. His sister would have found the irony amusing. She had spent her entire career fighting to earn the Federation's respect, only to receive it after she was dead. Schedule a meeting with the Federation Council for tomorrow, he said finally. But first, I want to review our strategic capabilities. What's the status of the Third Fleet? Admiral Morrison's task force completed their shakedown cruise 3 days ago. 50 ships, all equipped with our latest technology. They're ready for deployment. And the Seventh Fleet? Still in construction, but Admiral Kim has accelerated the timeline. She estimates they'll be ready for combat operations within 6 weeks. Lou nodded slowly. The human military had been expanding rapidly over the past decade, driven by a combination of territorial disputes and the growing realization that the galaxy was a dangerous place. But even with their expanded fleets, humanity could only field perhaps 200 ships of the line. Against an enemy that numbered in the tens of thousands, it would not be enough, unless they could find a way to level the playing field. General Hayes, I want you to contact Dr. Elizabeth Warren at the Advanced Weapons Research Division. Tell her that Project Prometheus has been approved for immediate implementation. Hayes looked surprised. Sir, Project Prometheus is still highly experimental. The quantum field generators alone are exactly what we need to fight an enemy that operates on quantum entanglement principles. Lou turned away from the tactical display, his mind already racing with possibilities. The Void Hunters think they understand human tactics because they absorbed one ship's worth of data. They have no idea what we're really capable of. 3 hours later, Lou found himself in a sterile conference room deep beneath the Swiss mountains, facing the holographic images of 12 Federation Council members. They represented the most advanced civilizations in known space, beings who had mastered technologies that humans could barely comprehend. But now, they looked to him with something he had never seen before. Desperation. Admiral Chen, spoke Chancellor Vex High. The same alien whose distress call had started this entire crisis. We cannot adequately express our gratitude for your sister's sacrifice. Her actions saved not just New Geneva, but our entire civilization. I appreciate your words, Chancellor. But gratitude won't stop the next Void Hunter attack, which is why we have called this meeting. Another council member, a crystalline being from the Rigel system, leaned forward. We need human assistance to develop new defensive strategies. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that we did not fully appreciate before. Lou studied the faces around the virtual table. These were beings who had ruled the galaxy for nearly a millennium, who had considered themselves the pinnacle of evolutionary development. The fact that they were asking for help from a species they had previously dismissed as primitive showed just how desperate the situation had become. What exactly are you asking for, counselors? A formal military alliance. Vexai replied. Combined fleets under unified command, shared intelligence, and most importantly, access to human combat doctrine and training methods. In exchange for full Federation membership, unlimited access to our scientific databases, and joint development of new technologies specifically designed to counter Void Hunter capabilities. It was a generous offer, perhaps more generous than humanity could have hoped for under normal circumstances. But Lu had not survived 3 decades of military service by accepting deals at face value. I need to understand something, Chancellor. Why now? For 800 years, the Federation has maintained that humans were too aggressive, too militaristic to be trusted with advanced technology. What's changed? Vexai was quiet for a long moment before responding. What has changed, Admiral, is our understanding of the universe we live in. We believed that intelligence and wisdom would always triumph over brute force. We thought that any species capable of spaceflight must share our commitment to peaceful coexistence. The alien's voice grew heavy with sorrow. The Void Hunters have shown us how naive we were. They're not like us, added the Rigelian Council member. They don't negotiate, they don't communicate, they don't even seem to be driven by resources or territory. They exist only to consume and destroy. Against such an enemy, our traditional approaches are useless. But humans, continued a third counselor, a flowing gaseous being from the Vega system. Humans come from a world that taught them to fight for survival every single day. Your species understands warfare in ways we never could. You see patterns and possibilities that escape our notice. Lu leaned back in his chair, processing what he had just heard. The Federation was essentially admitting that their entire philosophical approach to galactic civilization had been wrong. They had assumed that intelligence alone was enough to solve any problem. But now they faced an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or negotiated with. I'll need to consult with Earth's government before I can give you an official response, he said finally. But I can tell you this. If humanity agrees to this alliance, we'll need complete tactical authority over all combat operations. No interference from politicians, no second-guessing from council committees. War is not a democracy. Understood. Vexai nodded. We have seen what happens when politicians try to direct military operations. We will not repeat that mistake. The meeting continued for another hour, covering logistics and operational details, but Lu's mind was already elsewhere. He was thinking about his sister's last transmission, about the courage she had shown in the face of impossible odds. She had bought them time to prepare for the next phase of this war, and he intended to make the most of it. After the conference ended, Lu made his way to a secure communication terminal and placed a call that would change the course of human history. Dr. Warren? This is Fleet Admiral Chen. I need you to accelerate Project Prometheus to emergency status. We're going to need those quantum field generators operational within 4 weeks. Admiral, came the reply from the lead scientist. That's impossible. We haven't even finished the theoretical framework, let alone begun testing. Doctor, my sister just proved that impossible is a human specialty. Figure it out. The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of activity as humanity mobilized for a war unlike any in their history. Shipyards that had been operating at normal capacity suddenly went to round-the-clock production schedules. Research facilities that had been working on theoretical projects received unlimited funding and resources. Most importantly, every human military officer with combat experience found themselves teaching crash courses to Federation personnel who had never fired a shot in anger. Lu watched it all from his command center, coordinating with a dozen different agencies and governments while trying to prepare for an enemy they still didn't fully understand. The Federation had provided detailed sensor logs from their encounters with Void Hunter forces, and the picture they painted was deeply disturbing. The enemy wasn't just technologically advanced, they were evolutionarily perfect predators. Each defeat taught them new ways to kill. Each victory made them stronger. They adapted to new threats faster than any organic intelligence should have been able to, suggesting either artificial enhancement or a hive mind that spanned galactic distances. But humans had advantages too. They came from a world that had forced them to become the ultimate generalists, capable of adapting to any environment or threat. They had learned to use tools, to cooperate, and most importantly, to never give up no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. Admiral, General Hayes entered his office carrying a classified briefing folder. "We've received the final analysis from Dr. Warren's team. Project Prometheus is ready for field testing. End quote. We've received the tenture, with creases 1R. About, Lou accepted the folder and reviewed its contents with growing excitement. Dr. Warren's team had developed something unprecedented. A quantum field generator that could create localized disruptions in space-time itself. In theory, it would allow human ships to phase in and out of normal space, making them effectively untouchable while still allowing them to attack. Test results? Successful in all simulations, sir. The quantum field doesn't just make our ships harder to hit. It allows them to pass through solid matter while maintaining the ability to project weapons fire. We could literally fly a ship through the center of an enemy vessel while firing at point-blank range. Side effects? The field generators require enormous amounts of power, limiting their operational time to approximately 30 minutes. After that, the ship's power grid needs at least 6 hours to recharge. Hayes paused. There's also the psychological factor. Explain. Pilots report severe disorientation while operating in quantum phase. Some describe feeling like they're in multiple places at once, or experiencing memories that aren't their own. Dr. Warren thinks it might be some kind of quantum consciousness effect. Lou considered this information carefully. 30 minutes of near invulnerability, in exchange for temporary psychological distress and a long recharge time. It wasn't perfect, but against an enemy that adapted to conventional weapons, it might be exactly what they needed. How many ships can we equip with these field generators? The Third Fleet will be fully equipped within 2 weeks. After that, we can retrofit existing vessels at a rate of approximately 10 per week. Do it. And General? I want volunteers only for quantum phase operations. Nobody gets assigned to this duty without understanding the risks. 2 days later, Lou received the call he had been expecting. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Void Hunter fleet moving toward the Centauri system, home to 3 billion Federation citizens and one of their most important industrial centers. The enemy armada numbered over 5,000 ships, including several Queen vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had previously encountered. Time to target? Lou asked the sensor technician. 18 hours at their current speed, sir. 18 hours to get the Third Fleet into position and test humanity's newest weapons against an enemy that grew stronger with each battle. Lou activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice reaching every ship in the human armada. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Chen. We are about to engage a Void Hunter fleet that outnumbers us 10 to 1. They've had 4 weeks to analyze the tactics used by my sister and her crew. They think they understand how humans fight. He paused, thinking of Sarah's last transmission, of her crew's willingness to sacrifice everything for people they had never met. They're about to learn that the Prometheus was just the opening act. Today, we show them what happens when they threaten something that humans have decided to protect. Today, we introduce them to the concept of a Deathworlder Armada. The human fleet accelerated toward Centauri, their quantum field generators warming up and their crews preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Behind them, Federation reinforcements followed at maximum speed, but everyone knew that by the time they arrived, the battle would be decided. Lou studied the tactical display one more time, watching as 5,000 Void Hunter ships arranged themselves in perfect formation around the Centauri system. They moved with the confident precision of predators who had never met anything they couldn't consume. But as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace and activated their quantum field generators, something changed. For the first time in their existence, the Void Hunters encountered prey that refused to be caught. Ships that could phase through their grasping tentacles while delivering devastating attacks from impossible angles. Weapons that struck from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Battle of Centauri lasted 6 hours and became legend throughout the galaxy. When it was over, the Void Hunter threat had been broken, not through superior numbers or advanced technology, but through the simple refusal of humans to accept defeat. As Lou watched the surviving enemy ships flee into deep space, he thought about his sister's words. They asked for help from the wrong race. Sarah had been wrong about that. The Galactic Federation had asked for help from exactly the right race. They had asked for help from humans. And humans, as the galaxy was finally beginning to understand, were the one species that would fight impossible odds to protect innocent lives, no matter the cost.